I'd like to welcome you to another episode in the series where we explore various subjects such as psychology, philosophy, and history, and tie this in this series to balding, boldness, and hair loss as a case study to represent various concepts and ideas from these various subjects. If you enjoyed this video or any of the previous in the series, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Why do soldiers shave their heads? The hidden psychology of military haircuts. Introduction. The first thing a soldier loses. The sound of electric clippers. A young recruit sits silently in a barber's chair. The first lock of hair falls to the floor. Before a soldier fires a weapon, before they wear the uniform, before they march onto a parade ground, before they are trusted with responsibility, many armies throughout history have begun the transformation in the same way. They remove the hair. To a civilian, it may look like a simple haircut, a practical decision, a tradition, a style. But inside military culture, the haircut represents something much deeper. It represents the moment when an individual begins the journey from civilian to soldier. For thousands of years, armies have understood a powerful truth about human psychology. People behave differently when they believe they belong to something greater than themselves. A hairstyle is personal. It reflects identity. It can show personality, culture, status, fashion, and even rebellion. So when a military removes that symbol of individuality, it sends a message. You're entering a new world. You will be measured by your actions, not your appearance. You are no longer standing alone. But why hair? Why not simply give soldiers a uniform and leave their appearance alone? Why have some of the greatest military organisations in history cared so much about something growing from a person's head? The answer reveals a fascinating connection between appearance, discipline, teamwork, and human behaviour. The Roman Legion, the Spartan warrior, Napoleon's Grand Army, the soldiers fighting in the trenches of World War I, the United States Marine Corps, modern special forces. All of them reveal a different reason why armies care about hair. Sometimes it was about hygiene, sometimes it was about identity, sometimes it was about psychology, and sometimes it was about creating a person who could do something most humans naturally struggle with, put the mission above themselves. This is the hidden story of the military haircut. Chapter 1. Why hair matters to the military. The first reason soldiers have traditionally kept short hair is obvious: practicality. Military life is uncomfortable. Soldiers spend long periods outdoors. They sleep in camps, trenches, vehicles, ships, and temporary bases. They operate in environments where normal civilian routines disappear. A person who spends every day in an office can choose a hairstyle based on personal preference. A soldier operating in a desert, jungle, or battlefield has different priorities. Hair can collect dirt, it can hold sweat, it requires maintenance, and in conditions where hundreds of thousands of people live close together, hygiene becomes a military problem. Throughout history, armies have repeatedly faced outbreaks of disease caused by poor sanitation. One of the most famous examples came during World War I. Millions of soldiers lived underground in trenches where mud, water, and human waste created terrible conditions. The enemy was not only the army across the battlefield, the environment itself became an enemy. Lice infestations became so common that soldiers developed entire routines to remove them. Short hair made inspection easier, it made cleaning easier, it reduced another problem in an ordinary dangerous situation. But practicality alone does not explain everything. If the only purpose was hygiene, every soldier would simply have short hair. Yet many armies go further. They remove the hair at the beginning of training. They make the haircut part of a ceremony, part of a psychological transformation. This is where the deeper story begins. Chapter 2. The Roman Legion, creating the perfect soldier. When people imagine the Roman army, they often picture thousands of soldiers marching in perfect formation. The famous Roman legion did not become powerful simply because Rome had better weapons. Its true advantage was organisation. The Roman military created one of the earliest examples of a professional fighting force. A Roman soldier was not simply a man carrying a sword, he was a product of a system. Every soldier followed routines, every soldier maintained equipment, every soldier understood his place in larger formation. Rome controlled an enormous empire stretching from Britain to Egypt. Its armies contained men from many different cultures. A soldier from Spain might stand beside a soldier from Syria. A man from North Africa might fight alongside someone from Gaul. They could have different languages, different religions, different traditions. So, how did Rome create unity among people who had little in common? Through identity. The Roman army transformed individuals into something shared. A legionary. The soldier's equipment, clothing, behaviour, and appearance all communicated the same message. You are no longer only from your village. You are no longer only the son of a farmer or a merchant. You are a representative of Rome. The haircut was part of this larger philosophy. The army reduced visible differences because differences could become barriers. The soldier was taught that personal pride came not from standing apart, it came from belonging. A Roman soldier did not gain honour because he was unique. He gained honour because he was reliable, because the men beside him could trust him. The idea remains central to military thinking today. A battlefield is not won by the strongest individual, it is won by the group that functions best together. The Roman lesson is a strong team requires individuals willing to become part of something bigger. This applies far beyond the military. A football team cannot succeed if every player only cares about personal glory. A company cannot succeed if every employee works only for themselves. A family cannot function if every person refuses compromise. The Roman army understood something modern organisations struggle with. Individual talent is valuable, but coordinated talent is unstoppable. Chapter 3. The Spartans, when hair meant something completely different. The ancient Spartans provide a fascinating contrast because their relationship with hair was almost the opposite. The Spartan warrior became famous throughout history as a symbol of discipline, courage, and military toughness. The Spartan state was built around warfare. From childhood, boys entered the brutal education system known as the agage. They were trained to endure hunger, pain, exhaustion, and fear. They were taught that personal comfort was secondary to duty. But unlike many later armies that used shaved heads, Spartan warriors were famous for something different: long hair. Why? Because in Spartan culture, hair had meaning. The Spartans believed long hair represented freedom and pride. A famous story tells of a Spartan commander being asked why Spartans wore long hair before battle. His answer was that long hair made good-looking men appear even more impressive and made ugly men appear even more frightening. Whether the exact wording is historical or not, the message reveals something important. Appearance was connected to identity. For Spartans, long hair did not represent weakness, it represented confidence. The important lesson is that the military haircut was never really about the hair itself. Different cultures used hair differently. The Romans used standardization, the Spartans used symbolism. Both were trying to achieve the same goal: creating a psychological state where a warrior understood who they were. A Roman soldier looked like a living symbol of society's values. Different appearance, same purpose, identity. This teaches us an important lesson. Symbols only matter because humans give them meaning. A uniform, a haircut, a wedding ring, a national flag, a sports jersey. None of these objects have power by themselves. Their power comes from what they represent. The Spartan lesson is the way we see ourselves influences the way we behave. A person who sees themselves as disciplined is more likely to act with discipline. A person who sees themselves as a professional is more likely to act professionally. Chapter 4. The real purpose of the military haircut. Looking across history, we begin to see a pattern. The haircut was never just about hair, it was about transition. A civilian enters the military carrying years of personal habits, preferences, and experiences. The army needs something different. It needs people who can operate under pressure, people who can follow a plan, people who can trust strangers, people who can sacrifice comfort. The haircut becomes the first visible sign. The old environment is gone. A new standard has arrived. This is why military rituals are so powerful. Humans understand change through symbols. Graduation ceremonies, wedding ceremonies, religious ceremonies, professional uniforms. They mark important moments. The military haircut is one of the clearest examples. few minutes in a barber's chair tells a recruit your journey has begun. Part 2. Napoleon, the trenches, and the birth of the modern military identity. Chapter 5. Napoleon's Grand Army, turning millions of men into one army. When we think about military transformation, a few figures understood the psychology of soldiers better than Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon did not create the idea that appearance influences behaviour, but he mastered it. At the beginning of the 19th century, Europe was changing rapidly. Traditional armies made up of professional soldiers were being replaced by something much larger, mass armies. Before Napoleon, many European armies were relatively small forces made up of long-serving professionals. But after the French Revolution, France introduced a revolutionary idea that nation itself could provide soldiers. Instead of fighting only with a limited number of trained troops, France could mobilise hundreds of thousands of citizens. This created a new problem. How do you transform a farmer from the countryside, a factory worker from a city, and a university student into members of the same fighting force? How do you make strangers trust each other enough to march into battle? Napoleon understood that an army needed more than weapons. It needed identity. The soldiers of the French Revolutionary armies and later Napoleon's Grand Army were surrounded by powerful symbols. The uniform, the eagle standards, the marching formations, the ceremonies, the language of honour, everything communicated the same idea. You are no longer just an individual, you are part of France. This was particularly important because Napoleon's armies were enormous. During his campaigns, hundreds of thousands of men moved across Europe. They came from different regions and social backgrounds. Without shared identity, such a force could easily collapse. The uniform and military appearance created a psychological connection. A soldier looked around and saw thousands of people dressed like him. They shared the same colours, the same equipment, the same purpose, the same risks. They became something larger than themselves. This is one of the reasons military organisations care about appearance. A group of people wearing the same uniform often begins to think differently. Modern psychology calls this part of social identity theory. Humans naturally divide the world into groups, we and they. The military deliberately uses this tendency. A soldier must feel, my unit matters, my comrades matter, my actions affect everyone. Napoleon understood that a motivated army was more powerful than an army that was simply large. A soldier fighting only for himself has limits. A soldier fighting for his comrades can endure far more. The Napoleon lesson: shared identity can turn ordinary individuals into an extraordinary force. Chapter 6. The dark side of unity, when conformity goes too far. The military haircut represents unity, but history also teaches an important warning. Unity is powerful, but too much conformity can be dangerous. Military organisations are built around obedience and teamwork. These qualities can save lives, but when individuals completely lose their ability to think independently, the consequences can be serious. History provides examples when extreme military cultures demanded absolute conformity. The Japanese Imperial Army during the first half of the 20th century developed an intense culture of obedience, sacrifice and loyalty. Soldiers were taught that surrender was dishonourable and that individual survival was less important than duty. This created extraordinary endurance, but it also contributed to decisions and actions during wartime that caused immense suffering. The lesson is important, discipline is valuable, but obedience is not. The best military organisations do not simply create people who follow orders, they create professionals who understand the purpose behind those orders. Modern armies increasingly emphasise initiative. A soldier in a different situation may need to make decisions without waiting for instructions. The ideal soldier is not a robot. The ideal soldier is disciplined but capable of judgment. This creates a balance: humility without weakness, confidence without arrogance, teamwork without losing personal responsibility. The lesson for everyday life: good systems should improve people, not erase them. Chapter 7. World War I, when hair became a matter of survival. By 1914, European armies entered what many expected would be a short conflict. Instead, the world experienced industrial warfare on an unimaginable scale. The battlefield changed completely. Millions of men lived in trenches stretching across Europe. These trenches were not temporary shelters. They became entire underground worlds. Soldiers lived there for weeks and months. They slept in mud, they stood in freezing water, they fought diseases. And among the many problems they faced was one surprisingly small enemy: lice. The conditions of trench warfare were ideal for parasites. Large numbers of men lived together in cramped spaces, uniforms became dirty, bathing opportunities were limited, the cold weather made washing difficult. The problem became so widespread that armies created specific routines to deal with infestations. Soldiers would inspect clothing, they would clean equipment, they would attempt to maintain hygiene whenever possible. Short hair became part of this practical approach. It was easier to inspect, easier to clean, less likely to create problems. This period demonstrated something important about military culture. Many traditions that appear symbolic often begin with practical reasons. The haircut was not only about looking like a soldier, it was about functioning like one. The trenches taught soldiers a brutal lesson. Small problems become major problems when ignored. A tiny equipment failure could become deadly. A minor injury could become serious. A small mistake could affect an entire unit. The principle applies far beyond war. Successful people understand the value of maintenance. They do not wait until problems become emergencies. They maintain their health. They organise their finances. They develop useful habits. They fix small weaknesses before those weaknesses become disasters. The World War I lesson: preparation is often the difference between surviving and failing. Chapter 8: The American Soldier. Before the United States entered World War II, millions of Americans lived ordinary civilian lives. They were farmers, factory workers, students, office employees. They had different personalities, backgrounds, and experiences. Then they entered military service. Almost immediately they encountered one of the first signs of transformation: the military haircut. The famous GI haircut became one of the most recognisable symbols of American military life. The process was simple. A recruit sat down, the clippers moved, the civilian hairstyle disappeared, but psychologically something much bigger was happening. The recruit was entering a system where personal preference was no longer the highest priority. The army had a mission, and that mission required standardization. The United States had to transform millions of civilians into soldiers in a short period of time. Training camps across the country became factories of transformation. Recruits learned how to march, how to handle weapons, how to maintain equipment, how to work with people they had never met. The haircut was the first visible reminder: you are part of a larger organisation now. The transformation was not designed to remove individuality completely. American military culture has always valued initiative and personal responsibility. The goal was to create a balance: independent enough to make decisions, disciplined enough to follow a mission. The GI haircut became a symbol of transition. The civilian entered, the soldier emerged. The lesson: sometimes a new identity requires leaving behind old habits. Chapter 9: Why the first haircut is so psychologically powerful. The reason military organisations continue this tradition is because humans respond strongly to beginnings. The first day at school, the first day at a new job, the first day of training. Important beginnings create emotional memories. The military understand this. The first haircut is often one of the earliest moments where a recruit experiences a loss of control. Someone else decides, someone else sets the standard, someone else says, this is how things are done here. For many people this is uncomfortable, but that discomfort is intentional. Military training often places people in control situations where they must adapt. Why? Because combat is unpredictable. A soldier cannot expect everything to happen according to personal preference. The ability to adapt is essential. The haircut becomes a small lesson. Can you accept change? Can you put aside ego? Can you become part of a team? A few minutes with a pair of clippers begins answering those questions. Part 3: The Marine Corps, Special Forces and the Lessons Behind the Haircut. Chapter 10: The United States Marine Corps, the first step to becoming a Marine. Few military organisations are more closely associated with the shaved head than United States Marine Corps. For generations of Marine recruits, one of the first experiences after arriving at boot camp is sitting in a barber's chair and watching their civilian appearance disappear. At places like Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island in South Carolina and San Diego in California, thousands of young men and women have experienced the same ritual. They arrive carrying their own identity, their own hairstyle, their own clothes, their own history. Within hours, that begins to change. The haircut is not the hardest part of Marine training. It is not physically demanding. It does not require courage, but psychologically it matters because it is the first signal that the recruit has entered an environment where the individual must adapt to a higher standard. The Marine Corps does not believe that a haircut creates a warrior. The haircut is only a symbol. The real transformation comes through months of discipline, teamwork, physical exhaustion, and mental pressure. But symbols matter because they create a psychological starting point. The recruit looks in the mirror and sees something different. They are no longer simply a civilian who decided to join. They are now on the path to becoming a Marine. The Marine Corps and the power of ritual. Military organisations are built around rituals. The first uniform, the first salute, the first march, the first time a recruit earns recognition from instructors. These moments create emotional milestones. The Marine Corps understand that becoming a Marine is not just about learning skills, it is about changing how someone thinks. A person who believes I'm someone who gives up when things become difficult will behave differently when someone who believes I'm someone who finishes when I start. The purpose of training is to create the second mindset. The haircut begins that process. It tells the recruit you're entering a demanding environment. Your old habits will be tested. You will become part of a tradition that existed before you and will continue after you. This is why military traditions survive for generations. They connect individuals to something larger. A Marine recruit is not only thinking about themselves, they are connected to every Marine who came before them. Every battle, every sacrifice, every achievement. The haircut becomes a link between the past and the future. Chapter 12, Special Forces, why elite units sometimes break the rules. One of the most interesting things about military hair standards is that the most elite units sometimes have different approaches. Special operations forces around the world operate differently from conventional armies. Units such as the United States Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, and other elite formations often focus less on appearance and more on mission requirements. Why? Because the elite units operate under different conditions. A conventional army may need thousands of soldiers to look and operate consistently. A small special operations team may need flexibility. Their success depends heavily on individual expertise, creativity, and adaptation. The priority becomes, can this person perform? Can they solve problems? Can they operate under extreme pressure? Can the team succeed? This does not mean discipline disappears. In fact, elite units often have some of the highest standards in the military, but they understand the difference between a rule that supports performance and a rule that exists only because it always existed. This is a crucial leadership lesson. Good organisations understand why rules exist. They do not blindly follow traditions. They ask, does this help us achieve our purpose? If yes, keep it. If no, improve it. The Special Forces lesson. The best systems are disciplined but adaptable. Chapter 13. The haircut and the science of identity. Why does changing appearance affect people psychologically? Because humans are strongly influenced by identity. We constantly answer a hidden question. Who am I? Our answer affects our actions. A person who identifies as an athlete trains differently. A person who identifies as a professional prepares differently. A person who identifies as a leader behaves differently. The military haircut works because it creates a physical reminder of a new identity. The recruit cannot ignore the change. Every time they look into the mirror, they see evidence. Something has changed. They are part of something new. Psychologists often describe this as a connection between identity and behaviour. People tend to act consistently with the person they believe they are. This is why changing habits can be difficult. A person may say, I want to become healthier, but if they still identify as someone who dislikes exercise, their actions often return to old patterns. The military approach is different. It changes the environment first. New uniforms, new appearance, new routines, new expectations. Then behaviour follows. This is a powerful lesson for personal development. If you want to change your life, sometimes you must change the systems around you, change your environment, change your routines, change the identity you reinforce every day. Chapter 14. What civilians can learn from the military haircut. The average person will never experience military training. Most people will never march through a battlefield. Most people will never need to operate under combat conditions. but the lessons behind the military haircut apply to everyone. Lesson 1. Accept that transformation requires change. Many people want a different result without changing their behaviour. They want better health without changing their habits. They want career success without improving their skills. They want stronger relationships without changing how they communicate. The military haircut represents a simple truth. A new chapter often requires leaving something behind. The recruit cannot become a soldier while remaining exactly the same person. Growth requires adaptation. Lesson 2. Small rituals create big changes. The haircut itself does not create discipline, but it begins a series of disciplined actions. This is important. People often underestimate small habits. A morning routine, a training schedule, a commitment to learning, a regular review of goals. Small actions repeated consistently create identity. The military understands this better than almost any organisation. Discipline is not created in one dramatic moment. It is created through thousands of small decisions. Lesson 3. Your environment shapes you. The civilian environment often encourages personal preference. A military environment encourages collective responsibility. Neither is automatically better. They serve different purposes, but the lesson is clear. The people around you influence you. Your environment affects your standards. If you spend time around people who constantly improve, you're more likely to improve. If you spend time around people who avoid responsibility, that behaviour can become normal. Choose environments that support the person you want to become. Lesson 4. Discipline is a tool, not a punishment. Many people view discipline negatively. They think discipline means restriction, but soldiers understand discipline differently. Discipline creates reliability. A disciplined soldier can be trusted. A disciplined professional can be trusted. A disciplined person can trust themselves. The greatest benefit of discipline is not control, it is confidence. You know you can depend on yourself. Chapter 15. The final meaning of the military haircut. After examining thousands of years of military history, one thing becomes clear. The haircut was never really about hair. The Romans used appearance to create unity across an empire. Spartans used appearance to represent warrior identity. Napoleon used symbols to transform citizens to soldiers. World War I armies used short hair as a part of battlefield survival. US Marine Corps used the first haircut as the beginning of a psychological transformation. Special forces remind us that rules must serve a purpose. Different armies, different cultures, different eras, but the same human truth. People are influenced by symbols. The way we present ourselves affects the way we see ourselves. The groups we belong to influence the standards we accept. The habits we repeat shape the person we become. The military haircut is powerful because it represents a choice. Remain exactly as you are, or accept the challenge of becoming something more. The recruit who sits in the barber's chair is not simply losing hair, they are entering a new identity. And that may be the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes transformation begins when we are willing to let go of something familiar. Because before someone can become a soldier, a leader, professional, or simply a better version of themselves, they must first be willing to change. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.